Welcome back. Today we are tackling a really fascinating puzzle right at the heart of comparative mythology. The idea of the divine mountain.
Yeah, it pops up everywhere.
Exactly. We're drilling down specifically on Kunlun, the Chinese celestial pillar, and asking this, well, pretty fundamental question. Why do all these Asian origin stories, from China, Cambodia, Java, why do they seem to overlap so strongly? But then the actual details, they contradict each other.
It's a great question. And Kunlun is, well, it's foundational for ancient Chinese cosmology. It's called the forefather of mountains. It's that link between heaven and earth.
The axis mundi.
Precisely, the axis mundi, the symbolic center of the world, where everything pivots. And our sources, they often point to it as the place where Fuxi and Nua, the ancestors, survived a massive flood.
Right, and repopulated humanity from there. But here's the catch, and this is the really sharp insight our listener brought to us. The descriptions you find in the myths, the 9 gates, the 9-headed tiger guardian, the Kaming,
the jade pond, the peaches of immortality.
All of that, it just doesn't line up with the actual physical Kunlun mountain range you find on a map today in Western China. Not at all.
Which strongly suggests that the actual geography wasn't really the original point, you see. The physical mountains, they likely became an anchor later on, chosen maybe to house this powerful idea, this concept that already existed.
A localization of something older?
Yeah, an ancient memory, basically.
Okay, but the listener takes it a step further. They don't think that memory is just like abstract cosmology. They've got this analogy, we're calling it the firework analogy.
Ah, right.
The idea is these myths aren't just copies or variations on a theme. They are, and I'm quoting here, different memories of a single real-world event, just viewed from different cultural perspectives, different places, different times.
Interesting. So different angles on the same original flash.
Exactly. So our mission today is to use the evidence, all these different myths, like layers of tracing paper. Can we find the original image underneath all the cultural specifics? Find that original location.
Okay, so we need to filter out the noise, the local details, and find those common threads, the really strong unifying data points.
Let's start tracing then. We'll layer 3 big ones. Kunlun from China, the Khmer Foundation myth from Cambodia, and then those Mount Meru or Sila Raja myths from Java and Bali. First up, the connector motif.
Okay, so the common theme is definitely about connecting different realms. Heaven and earth, divine and mortal, that kind of thing.
Always.
But how they connect, that's where the viewpoints diverge. Kunlun in the Chinese texts really emphasizes this vertical path, a direct climb, the sky ladder.
Where mortals could theoretically ascend and become immortal spirits.
Right, it's an upward journey.
But then you look at the Khmer myth and it flips it completely, which is just fascinating. The hero, Priyathong, he has to get to the divine realm by holding onto a Naga princess's tail and going down.
Down into the water.
Into the underwater kingdom of this Naga, this serpent deity. So total descent.
And then Java is different again. It's horizontal. The story there is the island was unstable. It was shaking. So the gods literally picked up and moved the entire mountain, Mahameru, all the way from India.
On the back of a giant Naga and a turtle, no less.
Yeah, to basically pin the island down, stabilize the land. So the core idea is connection stability, yes, but the method remembered is totally different, almost certainly shaped by, the local geography and concerns.
That's a huge point. The mountain's function isn't fixed. It adapts to what that specific culture remembers needing, like stability for Java.
Exactly.
Which leads us straight into this other big pattern. The island, the water, the serpent, that seems to be everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. In, pretty much all these traditions, the sacred place, the mountain, it starts off as somehow unstable or surrounded by water, or it emerges from water.
Okay, like Kunlun.
Well, in the Kunlun story, Fuxi and Nua survive the Great Flood on the peak, so the mountain becomes essentially an island, the only safe place in a drowned world.
Right. And then the Khmer myth, it gives the Naga king the credit for creating Cambodia itself. How? By swallowing the water to reveal the land.
So the serpent controls the water to create the land and the Javanese memory. Different again. The island's already there, but it's remembered as floating freely on the ocean, always tumbling and shaking. So the Naga isn't removing water, it's helping to anchor the mountain that stabilizes the shaky island.
Wow. So it's the same elements, serpent, water, unstable land, but the memory of what happened, the sequence, it's completely customized.
Yeah.
Maybe reflecting local geology like earthquakes in Java.
Could be, but this specificity, this recurring memory of flood survival and island beginning, it really does strengthen the listener's idea of a single underlying event, doesn't it?
It really does. And maybe the most specific motif of all is the four rivers.
Ah, yes, the four rivers. That is a remarkably persistent detail. Kunlun mythology eventually described it as the source, the fountainhead of four major rivers flowing out to the four corners of the world.
And that's a direct parallel with the Garden of Eden story from Mesopotamia, right? Where one river flows out and splits into four heads: Pasan, Gihon, Tigris, Euphrates.
Exactly the same structure. Now, scholars generally agree, certainly in the Chinese Kunlun context, this is symbolic cosmology, not actual geography. You can't find four specific rivers flowing like that from the real Kunlun range.
But the key thing is, these two incredibly distant cultural centers, China and Mesopotamia, they're both clinging to the exact same memory structure, a sacred high place as the source of four rivers, even though it doesn't fit their later localized geography.
That shared, specific blueprint is hard to ignore.
Okay, so this brings us back to the methodology, the tracing paper idea.
Right, applying the filter. We need to try and look past the local adaptations, the faint lines, you could say. Things like the specific later names given to rivers or mountains in China or Java. We need to isolate the universal elements, the repeating patterns that show up everywhere, the thick lines.
Okay, thick line number one seems to be the guardian and this ninefold structure.
Definitely the guardian. Every single one of these sacred places is fiercely guarded. Kunlun has the Kaming, that nine-headed tiger, and also Luwu, a nine-tailed one.
Eden has the cherubim with the flaming sword.
And Bali, local beliefs put a powerful dragon, Nagabasuki, right inside the crater of Mount Agung, protecting it. So a terrifying guardian seems non-negotiable.
But you mentioned the ninefold structure.
Yes, and this is where the Kunlun Chinese viewpoint preserves something incredibly specific. Kunlun is described with 9 city gates, 9 crooked peaks, 9 wells. Even heaven has 9 levels in some accounts.
Hold on a sec, though. Are we sure about relying so much on a number? I mean, 9 is often just symbolic in ancient cultures, isn't it? Like, it just means many or complete. Why are we treating this 9 as a literal thick line and not just, poetic license?
That's a really fair point. And usually I'd agree, numbers can be symbolic. But here's why it feels like a thick line. It's repeated so consistently, alongside other specific features like dates and peaks, within the Kunlun descriptions, which are otherwise geographically mismatched. If everything else was just vague symbolism, maybe. But having this specific number tied repeatedly to architectural or physical features, it feels like a persistent memory trace of something tangible, something actually structured in 9 parts at the original site.
Okay. I see the argument. The specificity alongside the repetition makes it stand out. Let's tentatively accept the ninefold structure as a key data point. What's the second thick line?
The fortune. The sacred place always contains some kind of life-altering prize, a treasure, a fortune.
Okay, like the Peaches of Immortality at Kunlun.
Exactly, or the Tree of Life in Eden. In Bali, it's sometimes remembered as gold or diamonds associated with the Naga guardian.
And for the Khmer?
For the Khmer people, arguably, the fortune was the land itself. Cambodia. Stability and fertile land provided by the Naga king. The ultimate prize in that context.
So the nature of the fortune gets translated culturally, but the core idea of immense life-changing value being found there, that's universal.
Precisely. The form shifts, the value remains.
Okay, so let's synthesize. After applying this tracing paper filter, what's the composite image? What profile are we looking for?
The profile that emerges is actually pretty detailed. We're looking for a single, prominent, high-elevation place, almost certainly a mountain. Critically, it needs to hold an ancestral memory of being an island, or perhaps the only peak that survived a world-ending flood.
Okay, high mountain, island memory, flood survival.
It also needs to be remembered as a fountainhead for major river systems, and it must be mythologically guarded by some kind of terrifying entity and associated somehow with a ninefold structure.
Wow. That's a very specific set of requirements. A 9-peak island summit, surviving a flood, source of rivers, guarded, holding a fortune.
It is. Which brings us to the next stage.
Right. The moment of truth. We have this incredibly detailed composite profile. Does any location anywhere in Asia actually fit that description, fit all those elements?
Well, this is where the listener's research points us to a location that when you lay it over our composite profile, point by point, the convergence is, well, it's pretty startling.
Okay, don't keep us in suspense.
The proposed location is Namunukula, a mountain range in the central highlands of Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka. Okay, let's test it against our profile. First, that really specific detail. the ninefold structure.
Namunukula. In the local Sihale language, the name literally means 9 peaks.
Wait, really? Not symbolically 9, but literally 9 peaks.
Literally 9 peaks. It's a direct 1.1 linguistic and geographic match to that specific Kunlun 9 motif, the 9 gates, 9 peaks we kept seeing in the Chinese sources. It collapses that gap between mythic number and physical description.
Wow, okay. Significant. What about the island flood peak memory?
Well, Namunukula is a major mountain range situated squarely on the island of Sri Lanka, which itself is a prominent high-elevation island. So it perfectly satisfies that deep island memory we traced across the Kunlun, Khmer, and Javanese traditions.
Okay, ticks that box. Third, the guardian.
Local folklore, even today, confirms the mountain is believed to be protected by a powerful guardian deity named Indaka. Fits the universal guardian archetype perfectly. The Kaming, the cherubim, Nagabasuki, Indaka.
Right, guardian confirmed. And finally, the fountainhead aspect, the rivers.
The Namunukula Range itself acts as a source for some major Sri Lankan rivers like the Kirindi Oya and the Meneganga. But crucially, the wider central highlands area right there contains Adam's Peak, or Supada.
Which is hugely significant in multiple religions.
Exactly. And Adam's Peak is mythologically considered the source of 4 major rivers flowing outwards. So that reinforces the exact 4-river archetype we found embedded in both the Eden and the later Kunlun myths.
So, Namunukula and its surrounding highlands seem to fit the entire mythological dataset: 9 peaks, island, guardian, fountainhead, flood survival memory, implied by the island context potentially better than any of the later localized anchors like the physical Kunlun Range or symbolic Meru.
The geographical fit is remarkably tight across all the thick lines we identified.
Okay, the geography is compelling, but the listener didn't stop there, did they? They pushed into linguistics as well.
That's right. The listener argues that the geography is basically locked down by a linguistic trace, specifically concerning the royal titles used across Southeast Asia.
Yes, this was fascinating. The claim revolves around the title Salaja, which means mountain king. This title was used by rulers in places like Funan, ancient Cambodia, Java, Bali. It signified their divine connection and authority, linking them to Mount Meru.
A very prestigious title, connecting the ruler to the cosmic mountain.
But the listener's argument is that Sihale isn't originally Sanskrit or local. They claim it's actually a foreign mispronunciation, a corruption of the indigenous Sri Lankan title, Sihale, King of Sihale.
Whoa, okay. That's a big claim. So the Mountain King title that anchored empires for centuries was actually a garbled memory of King of Sihale. How strong is the evidence for Sihale being the old name?
Well, the listener points to historical documents, specifically the 1815 Candian Convention, the treaty signed with the British.
Okay, a primary source.
And in that document, the indigenous name used for the kingdom, before colonization really took hold and names like Ceylon or Lanka became dominant, is clearly written as Sihale.
Sihale.
So the argument is, as the memory or influence of this central place spread outwards, cultures hearing Sihale interpreted it through their own linguistic filters, landing on the similar sounding but conceptually different Sihale, Mountain King.
Which would neatly explain why rulers in, say, Java would adopt a seemingly foreign Mountain King title they were referencing the original powerful king of Sihale.
Exactly. And if the origin point is Sihale, Sri Lanka, then it potentially sheds light on those weird descriptions of the Kunlun people you find in some Chinese texts.
Ah, right. The listener brought that up too, like the old Book of Tang.
Yeah, where Kunlun, or sometimes Kurun, isn't a place, but refers to a people from the islands of the southern seas. And how are they described?
Curly-haired and black-bodied. And significantly, they can tame elephants.
Which is a pretty striking fit for the ancient inhabitants of Sri Lanka, known for their expertise with elephants.
So the name Kunlun might have originally referred to the people from Sihale before it got attached to a mountain range in China.
That seems to be the implication. And this Sihale as origin idea also solves another puzzle. The Queen Mother of the West, Shuamu, in Chinese mythology.
Okay, how so?
Well, think about perspective. If this island, Sihale, was indeed the ancient sacred center, the source of immortality, the stable point after the flood then for the Chinese civilization, located far to the east.
Ah, I see. Looking westwards towards the origin.
They would naturally remember the primary female deity associated with that sacred, life-giving place as the Queen Mother of the West. Her name isn't just cultural, it's a geographical pointer, indicating her direction relative to them.
Right. Her position is defined by China's position relative to Sihale. That makes sense.
And there's one more piece of geographical validation from the listener. They pinpoint the specific location for the fountainhead memory, the Garden of Eden parallel.
Not just the Namunukula range, but somewhere more specific.
Horton Plains is part of the same Central Highlands. Why there? Because Horton Plains is ecologically unique, a distinct plateau, and it functions as the headwaters for 3 major rivers, the Mahaweli, the Kilani, and the Wallowa.
Okay, so it fits that source of rivers archetype perfectly, tying back to the Eden and Kunlun 4-river motifs.
It seems to. So all these threads, the geography, the linguistics, the descriptions of people, the perspectives, they all seem to converge on this Sri Lankan Central Highland location.
Which leads, I suppose, to the listener's final overarching argument, this idea of deliberate obscuration.
Yes, the hypothesis of obscuration. The listener posits that the modern emphasis on names like Lanka or Ceylon, especially after 1948, and the way Sihale, and another ancient name, Jambudipa, faded from the island's official identity. Well, they suggest this might not have been accidental.
That it might have been a way to deliberately break the connection, to obscure this potential role as the mythological center point.
That's the provocative suggestion, that erasing the name Sihale effectively erased the key to unlocking this entire interconnected web of Asian mythology and its geographical origin.
Wow, that's quite a conclusion.
So let's try and wrap this up. We started with a puzzle. Divine mountains, overlapping myths, contradictory details. Where does this deep dive leave us?
Well, it leaves us with a pretty unified thesis, presented by the listener through this evidence. The idea is that the core memory, the thick lines of the divine mountain myth, Kunlun, Meru, whatever name it took locally, actually points consistently towards Namunukula and Horton Plains in ancient Sihale, Sri Lanka.
So those local myths we see across Asia aren't random copies. They're like customized viewpoints, memories shaped by distance and local geography, but all looking back ancestrally to this one island peak complex that survived a cataclysm and was seen as the source of life and stability.
Right. And suddenly, the whole cosmological map of Asia seems to potentially reorient around this island center. It challenges not just the geography we thought we knew, but maybe some deeper historical narratives too.
Which raises one final and honestly very high-stakes question that the listener leaves us with. If the geographical center of Asian mythology might have been mislocated for centuries, what about key spiritual founders?
You're referring to the part about Buddha's origins.
Exactly. The listener cites researchers going back to Edward Mueller in 1883, and more recently, Gierathne Pathioraki, who claim there are verifiable rock inscriptions in Sri Lanka. Inscriptions which, they argue, clearly place Gautama Buddha's origin in Sri Lanka, not India or Nepal.
And the listener suggests this finding, based on primary epigraphic evidence, is perhaps being deliberately ignored or suppressed by mainstream historical accounts.
That's the contention. It opens up this incredibly provocative possibility. Was the potential mislocation of the mythological center, Kunlun Meru, just the first layer? Could the spiritual geography of the entire continent also be fundamentally misunderstood?
It definitely takes the tracing paper methodology into profoundly challenging territory. If the origin point for the myths shifted, what else might have shifted with it?
It's a lot to think about. We really encourage you, the listener, to consider this method filtering for those deep recurring patterns, those thick lines of evidence. Can it reveal a different picture of ancient history than the one maybe you've always accepted? What stands out to you in this web of connections?
Definitely food for thought.
We'll leave it there for this week. See you next time on The Deep Dive.